Hello and welcome to Materially Speaking. I'm Nikhil Mundra. I lead strategy at Lubrizol. Now, before we begin, I have a quick question for our viewers. Let's look at these two pipes. Except for the color, these plumbing pipes look pretty identical, right? But here's the catch. If you were to try and run hot water through them every single day, there's only one of them which will really do the job well. And that's the CPVC one for you. That's the interesting thing about material science. Sometimes the biggest innovations are actually hiding in products that we use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's water flowing through our homes, the medical devices that are available in hospitals, or the kind of infrastructure that powers modern industries like data centers. These advanced materials are prevalent in much more than what we can imagine. And that's exactly what we are going to explore today. I'm delighted to welcome John Valukas, Senior Vice President for Lubrizol Engineered Materials. Welcome to India, John. It's great to have you with us.
Yeah, namaste to our viewers, and thank you, Nikhil. It's fabulous to be here.
John, it's really an interesting time to be in India. We are already the fifth largest economy in the world. As per some estimates, we are expected to be the third largest economy within this decade. India is evolving at an exceptionally fast pace. Now, what really stands out is not just the scale, but what's happening is a culmination of various things coming together. Whether it's a large young population, the rapid level of urbanization, infrastructure growth, and the expanding healthcare access as well. You see new cities coming up every single day, a lot of industries modernizing, and more people evolving and coming into the middle class, millions of them, which have higher levels of expectations when it comes to safety, quality, and sustainability. Now, all of this is also increasing the need of technology access. You've seen how markets evolve globally. And if you can share with us some insights on how do you see India evolve and how do you see the kind of industries that are going to evolve in India?
Yeah, sure. If I look back 25 years ago, India was this big ball of potential, right? But it had some gaps in infrastructure. It had some gaps in housing. It had some gaps still in education. And it reminds me a little bit of the airplane. So the airplane, there were drawings of airplanes back in the 1500s, the thought process. But it took, 400 years for people to get the engine technology, to be able to get the metal technology, to be able to get the fuel technology and the wing technology to be able to lift off. And I think now you're starting to see those gaps fill in India. And that's given the opportunity for India really to take off at this point. I think you've also got a really strong entrepreneurial spirit here, and that's a big opportunity, a really striking opportunity for us to make good, positive movements as we go forward. And I feel that we're in a position where we have that footprint in advanced materials to be able to take advantage of that.
Great point. Now, listening to you talk about all these developments and the kind of value chain coming together, looking at key sectors like homes, healthcare, mobility, infrastructure, there's a common thread that's running through all of it. Polymers aren't exactly things that people discuss over dinner conversations, but it's interesting to see that they're actually present across these different industries. In fact, most of us probably don't realize that we interact with a lot of polymer-based products on our day-to-day lives. And for someone who's hearing polymer for the first time, what would be your thought around that?
Yeah, I'd actually say that it has to do with everything, right? Everything that we have in life, maybe the chair that you're sitting on, right? The water that flows through your house, the medical devices that go into your body, and even the car that you drive. Polymers are absolutely everywhere. The reason that they're so important is that they support us with making products lighter, stronger, and longer lasting. And when we think about countries like India, and their growth and their modernization, the demand for those kind of products are just going to continue to grow as we go forward.
So, John, you've landed the point pretty well. Polymers quietly enable so many things beyond what one can imagine. If you were to tie this down to the India growth story as well, when we think about economic growth, we often think about new buildings, expanding cities, better healthcare, digital infrastructure that's coming up exceptionally in India, and rising living standards. Where do you think advanced polymers really fit into this growth story? And how do they really contribute to India's growth journey?
Yeah, one way to think about this is that as these economies grow, we start to see more demand for infrastructure, and the quality of materials is really critical to that growth. When we think about India today, the per capita consumption of polymers is still very low and far below many other developed countries. And that really tells us that there's substantial opportunity for us to see growth here as we get the urbanization and that modernization taking place. What's important is that polymers aren't the end product. They're really the enabler to be able to make the type of products that we need. Take something as fundamental as water. Historically in India, plumbing systems relied upon metal pipes, right? And that was up until about 25 years ago. And while those materials served their purpose at the time, they also could face a lot of challenges, right? They'd have corrosion over time, and this can impact like the quality of the water, right? And so now you've got advanced materials such as CPVC that offers the corrosion resistance, the durability, and allows us to use both hot and cold water over long periods of time. And that's an example of how that innovation can improve something people that depend on every single day.
That's a great example because clean water is something we often take for granted. And yet the material carrying the water can make such a significant difference in terms of how it really delivers clean water to your area. Water infrastructure is just one area. India is also experiencing massive digital transformation, whether it's cloud computing, AI, e-commerce, digital payments, or even streaming services. The demand for data and connectivity is really growing at an unprecedented pace. We are seeing significant investments in data centers across the country as India leads the digital infrastructure needed to support that growth. So how do you see this trend and what role can advanced materials play in enabling the next generation of data center?
I think it's fascinating how our definition of infrastructure has really changed, right? A generation ago, when we talked about infrastructure, what were we talking about? We were talking about bridges, roads, airports, right? All those things that were critically important. And today, those things are still critically important, but today, we've got digital infrastructure, and that's become just as essential to us. Every online payment, every video stream, and every cloud application, right? And increasingly, every AI interaction depends on these data centers operating seamlessly in the background, right? And globally, we're seeing tremendous investment in this space. And India is emerging as one of the most exciting markets for this. As digital accelerates and the demand for data grows, we'll continue to see the need for that resilient digital infrastructure. And I think that's really where advanced materials play a surprisingly important role. Data centers require systems that are efficient, right, safe, reliable, and really built for continuous operation, not just for a short period of time. And whether it's thermoplastic polyurethane like TPU that supports connections and cable solutions, or CPVC that supports critical cooling water or fire safety infrastructure, and that would be things like aspiration systems. Advanced polymers really create the conditions that allow facilities to operate with confidence.
So John, if I hear you correctly, advanced materials are doing much more than what people usually imagine. Whether it's a home, a hospital, or even data centers, they're really working behind the scenes. But here's what I'm curious about. What does that actually look like in everyday life? Where are people interacting with these advanced materials without even knowing it?
Yeah, I think almost everywhere, actually. One of the things I love about this industry is that once you start looking for advanced materials, you begin to see them all the time around you. Take healthcare, for example. We have advanced TPU solutions that are used in medical devices, and they help improve patient care by reducing the recovery times. They improve safety and comfort, or even consider mobility. As EVs become more common, TPU materials can help enable durable charging cables and also lightweight components that support efficiency and performance as well. Even something as familiar as a pair of running shoes, for instance, they contain advanced TPU. And that goes in there to give you comfort. It goes in there to give you cushioning, and it goes in there to give you durability as well. As India's focus on wellness and fitness continues to grow, which we expect it will, we're seeing these materials show up in performance footwear, in wearables, and in products that are designed to help people lead healthier lives. And that's really why we see the space being so exciting. The same material science that helps support critical infrastructure can also touch people's lives in very personal ways, giving you a softer material, helping to keep you healthier and live better every day.
So, John, we've spoken about how advanced materials are enabling everything from infrastructure to healthcare. But for someone who's outside the industry who doesn't really know one material from another, how does one distinguish between which material is right for which application?
I think the first question you need to ask is, what properties do you need, right? And you do that by saying, what problem are we trying to solve? The types of questions we need to be asking are, will it face conditions like exposure to heat, pressure, chemicals? Will it come into contact with people? Will it go inside the body? And what are the safety requirements of that material? And what do we do if that material fails? These are really the questions that guide the material selection. At the end of the day, it's about finding the right balance of properties, right? The best material isn't necessarily the most advanced one. It's the one that's best suited for the application.
Can you give us an example of that in practice?
Yeah, certainly. Let's take piping systems, for example. At first glance, a pipe is really just a pipe, right? But the demands placed on that pipe can be really dramatically different depending on where that's being used. So it might be carrying, for example, hot water in a residential environment, or maybe it's carrying corrosive materials in a large industrial facility. When you're in a large industrial facility, it isn't, just a nice to have for performance. It's a requirement, right? To make sure that you're withstanding, the real operating environment that it's dealing with, and you need to do it safely and you need to do it reliably over a very long period of time. And that's really why advanced materials such as CPVC and those distinct versions of them are created to be able to cover those different applications. They help enable safer water delivery, durable infrastructure, and ultimately create a more reliable industry as we start to look to build the growth of the infrastructure within India.
So, John, in many ways, what you're saying is the right material selection can play a very vital role in not only what it does, but also how the entire system performs. Another part of your business is in helping improve products that people interact with much more directly, and that's on the healthcare side. When it comes to healthcare, the stakes are incredibly high because you're interacting directly with patient outcomes and medical care. How does material selection really influence medical devices and healthcare solutions?
Materials need to meet demanding requirements for safety, performance, reliability, and really patient comfort. And medical devices aren't just simply judged on whether or not it works. They need to work consistently, they need to work safely, and many times they need to be in direct contact with patients and even sometimes inside their bodies. That's where you have advanced solutions like TPU that can make a real difference. They can help enable a medical device that's flexible, that's durable, and it can really support a better patient care. So for instance, by being able to have a device that is low impact, it can make for a shorter recovery period. It can make for less of an incision, which creates a much better outcome for the end-all be-all for the patient. And ultimately, we're not just improving infrastructure in our businesses, we're improving everyday lives.
John, as we've discussed, polymers are really enabling everything from water infrastructure and healthcare to mobility and digital connectivity as well. But the world really doesn't stand still. Regulations evolve, new industries emerge, technologies evolve, and with that, customer expectations also continue to rise. So how do advanced materials really keep pace with such a dynamic environment?
I think if you look throughout history, every major phase of economic and societal development is really accompanied by advances in advanced materials. So industrialization created new demands. Urbanization created new demands. Today, we're seeing the same thing with electrification, with sustainability, with digitalization, and AI as well. As the world changes, the materials need to really evolve alongside it, right? The questions that we're asking today are different than the questions that we were asking 20 years ago. Customers want solutions that are not just high performing anymore. They're looking for high sustainability, right? They're looking for efficiency. They're looking to have a tailored product to their own personalization of need. And that's really why innovation remains so important.
And innovation has always been a key part of Lubrizol's own story.
Absolutely. Innovation isn't something that we do occasionally. It's embedded in how we operate. Over the years, we've introduced a number of industry-first solutions. Whether it was way back when pioneering CPVC for the fire sprinkler systems, or developing a bio-based TPU solution. Our focus has always been on anticipating future needs and solving emerging challenges. And I think what's really exciting today is that innovation isn't just about creating new materials, right? It's about creating smarter solutions that really address real-world problems for customers and ultimately society.
And when you look at India specifically, it feels like innovation is becoming an increasingly important part of our growth story.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree. In many ways, innovation's always been part of India's DNA. You have the best institutions like IIT and thriving startup ecosystems. India has a long tradition of solving complex challenges and in very, very creative ways. Again, that entrepreneurial spirit. What's particularly exciting is the pace at which these ideas can come to scale here because of the size and capability of the country. India is one of the most dynamic markets in the world, and technology adoption is really accelerating here. And industries are evolving very quickly, and customer expectations continue to rise. And at the very same time, India's a very diverse market, right? As they say, there are many Indias. And that's where we talked a little bit about that personalization and that customization that's coming into the marketplace. You have customers out there that are looking for premium, high-performance solutions, while others are seeking for that value-driven innovations that address those different needs in each of those use cases. That diversity challenges companies to innovate differently. It requires that we create different solutions for our customers. And those solutions need to be, both globally advanced, but they also need to be locally relevant. And that's one of the reasons that India is such an exciting place and an exciting market for Lubrizol.
So, John, you made an interesting point about being locally relevant. One thing that keeps coming up recurringly during our conversations is that every market evolves differently. How do you ensure that innovation remains relevant to the needs of India per se?
Yeah, so that's a really important question because there's only value in innovation when it solves a real life problem and for a customer. While we benefit from global expertise and decades of experience across many, many different industries, ultimately we recognize that every single market has its own priorities, its own regulations, its own landscape, and its own pace of development. So as India continues to modernize, we're seeing evolving standards. We're seeing increasing expectations around safety, around quality, sustainability, and performance. India recently released the National Building Construction Standards, and we're glad CPVC is ideally suited to be able to address India's evolving construction needs. For us, success isn't just about bringing global technologies to India. It's about understanding the local needs and ensuring that those technologies are relevant to the realities of the Indian market.
And that actually requires us being very close to our customers.
Absolutely. The closer you are to your customers, the better you're going to understand their challenges, and ultimately, the better define the opportunities, right? That's why we've continued to invest in India across multiple fronts. We've strengthened our local manufacturing capabilities. We've expanded our CPVC resin and compound production footprint. We've invested in advanced innovation capabilities. And recently, we established a new medical extrusion facility that's going to support healthcare applications as well. These investments, they allow us to work more closely with our customers. They accelerate innovation. They respond more effectively to our customer and local market needs. Our goal is really to combine that global science with the local insight. And when we put those two together, we're delivering the right solution for the customer.
So in many ways, it's essentially global expertise that you deliver through a local lens.
Exactly. One thing that I've learned about India is that there's not a single customer need or a single growth story. India is highly diverse, and its market has very different customers. And those different customers come with different expectations, different application requirements, and ultimately truly a different value proposition that they're bringing forward. So our role is really to understand those needs and develop solutions that are fit for purpose, and do that while maintaining the quality, the reliability, the performance standards that our customers are ultimately going to expect regardless. And that's why keeping that local market need in front of us at the center of our strategy is so critical.
Well, John, I can safely say that after today's conversation, I'm never going to look at a pipe, a cable, or even my running shoes for that matter with the same lens again. We've covered a lot of ground today, from infrastructure to healthcare to digitalization. Is there something that you'd like to share as final thoughts with our audience?
Yeah, I'd encourage the audience to stay curious. Some of the most important innovations in the world are often those that we rarely see. And often the materials behind those innovations are helping to shape the future in ways that today we really can't imagine.
I completely agree, John. Thank you for that insightful conversation and for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil, as well.
And with that, thank you for joining us on Materially Speaking.